The godfather of heavy metal and Prince of Darkness, Ozzy Osbourne, has passed away at the age of 76. He was just 19 when he started his career as the frontman of Black Sabbath. He also had huge success as a solo artist, and later in his life, he revived his career with the reality TV show The Osbournes. He leaves behind his wife and manager Sharon, 6 children, and several grandchildren.
For over 5 decades, Ozzy Osbourne screamed into the microphone like a man possessed, defining heavy metal and shocking audiences worldwide. He survived drug overdoses, drunken stage falls, and even a near-fatal ATV accident. He was the guy who once bit the head off a bat in front of thousands of fans and laughed about it. But on July 22, 2025, the man they called the Prince of Darkness took his final breath. His life ended quietly, at home, surrounded by family. Yet what happened in those last 24 hours? What words were spoken? Who stood by his side? And what music played in his final moments? This is the haunting, moving, and surprisingly peaceful story of Ozzy Osbourne's final day on Earth. And trust me, you'll never hear his music the same way again. Ozzy Osbourne wasn't supposed to die quietly. This was the same man who lived on chaos like oxygen. He came from Aston, Birmingham, an industrial area filled with working-class grit. Born John Michael Osbourne on December 3, 1948, he struggled with dyslexia, left school early, and bounced through odd jobs before stealing a TV and winding up in jail. That stint behind bars should have been the start of a miserable life of crime. Instead, it pushed him toward music. In 1968, he formed Black Sabbath with Tony Iommi, Geezer Butler, and Bill Ward. Together, they invented heavy metal. Their music was dark, heavy, and unapologetic. Songs like Paranoid and War Pigs became generational anthems. And front and center was Ozzy, his eerie voice wailing lyrics about war, death, and insanity. He wasn't the best technical singer, but his voice carried raw emotion few could match. Of course, fame came with its demons. Ozzy spiraled into drugs and alcohol. He famously snorted ants on tour. He was arrested multiple times, kicked out of Black Sabbath in 1979 for being too wild even for them, and launched a solo career fueled by pure excess. His infamous 1982 bat-biting incident cemented his reputation as the unhinged Prince of Darkness. Yet he survived, over and over. He nearly died in a plane crash in 1982, suffered third-degree burns in a 1979 house fire, and crashed an ATV in 2003 that left him with a broken collarbone, 8 fractured ribs, and a punctured lung. Somehow, he always came back, often joking, "I'm like a cockroach, you can't kill me." But disease eventually slowed him down. In 2020, Ozzy revealed he had Parkinson's disease, a progressive neurological disorder that slowly stripped him of mobility and speech. The diagnosis came after years of health scares and surgeries, and by 2025, he required a cane or wheelchair for public appearances. Still, he remained fiercely determined to perform one last show. In Birmingham, the very city where it all began. The event, titled Back to the Beginning, reunited the original members of Black Sabbath for one night only. It wasn't just a concert, it was a farewell celebration of heavy metal itself. Ozzy was physically frail, unable to stand for long periods. He performed seated on a Gothic bat throne, a symbolic nod to his outrageous past. Despite Parkinson's tremors and a weakened voice, when the opening riff of War Pigs started, he transformed. Fans, 45,000 of them inside Villa Park, screamed as Ozzy delivered a defiant performance. The show's set list included Sabbath classics like Paranoid and Iron Man, along with solo hits Crazy Train and Mama, I'm Coming Home. Many fans said it felt less like a concert and more like a funeral for an era. Even Ozzy himself seemed emotional, telling the crowd, This is it. Thank you for everything. I love you all from the bottom of my heart." The concert raised $140 million for charity, funding Parkinson's research, local hospitals, and music programs. It was hailed as one of the greatest farewell shows in rock history. Days later, fans were still buzzing online, posting clips with captions like, "He gave us everything, even at the end." On July 21st, the day before his death, Ozzy posted a cryptic image on Instagram, a backstage sign from the Birmingham show that read, "Back to the beginning, the final show." There was no caption, just the haunting sound of Mr. Crowley playing in the background. Fans flooded the comments, some joking, some worried. "This feels like goodbye. You okay, Oz?" But Ozzy didn't respond. That night, he had dinner with Sharon and his children, Kelly, Jack, Amy, and his older kids, Jessica and Louis, from his first marriage. They sat together quietly, reminiscing. For someone whose life had been defined by chaos, it was startlingly calm, a man at peace with himself, finally slowing down. The morning of July 22, 2025, began quietly in the Buckinghamshire countryside. Ozzy Osbourne's home wasn't a Gothic castle or Hollywood mansion anymore. It was a warm, private family estate in Jordan's, far removed from the madness of touring life. Over the years, Sharon had transformed it into a sanctuary for her husband's health and peace of mind. Ozzy awoke early. His breathing was labored but steady, the kind of breathing that comes from decades of strain and a battle with Parkinson's. Sharon, who had been his manager and closest ally for over 40 years, was already awake, quietly tending to him. A nurse who regularly assisted with his condition checked vitals and adjusted medication for tremors and muscle stiffness. What struck those present was the calm. This wasn't a man raging against the dying of the light. It was a man who had made peace with it. For someone who once lived as loudly as Ozzy, the silence was profound. Kelly Osbourne, one of his most publicly affectionate children, later said privately to friends, "He was smiling that morning. It was almost like he knew." There was no grand announcement, no camera crew, no entourage, just family and the faint sound of music playing on a nearby speaker, old Sabbath tracks, and one song that Sharon reportedly chose herself, "Changes." It was the same song Ozzy and daughter Kelly recorded together in 2003, which became one of his most personal hits. Breakfast was simple: tea, toast, and fruit. But Ozzy barely ate. Instead, he talked. He shared stories of Birmingham, of the first time he ever sang on stage, of how terrified he was stepping up to that microphone in 1968. Sharon held his hand, often tearful but composed, because Sharon had always been the strong one, the one who negotiated contracts, who shielded him from bad deals, who, famously, saved him from self-destruction in the 1980s. It wasn't a dramatic goodbye speech. Ozzy never was one for poetry, but it was meaningful. He simply said, "You know I love you, right? All of you. Every one of you saved me. You kept me here." Later in the morning, Ozzy's older children, Jessica and Louis, visited. Unlike Kelly and Jack, they largely avoided the spotlight and reality TV fame, but they shared an equally strong bond with their father. The family sat together in the living room, laughing about silly memories. Ozzy accidentally putting dog food in the oven thinking it was meat, his uncontrollable swearing on live TV, and the infamous moment on the Osbournes where he fought with a broken remote control for what felt like hours. For years, Ozzy had carried regret over missing parts of his children's early lives due to fame and addiction. That morning felt like a redemption of sorts, a quiet circle closing. He looked at Jack and Kelly, both now parents themselves, and softly said, "You did it better than me, and I'm proud." Sharon placed a small cross necklace in his hand, a piece he wore often in the early Sabbath years but had stored away. It was a symbolic gesture, one part faith, one part love, and one part memory. Sharon whispered something to him then, inaudible to anyone else. Amy, who famously chose not to appear on the Osbournes' reality show, sang softly while holding his other hand. The song she chose was Dreamer, Ozzy's own reflective ballad about imagining a better world. "I'm just a dreamer. I dream my life away." Ozzy, too weak to sing along, just closed his eyes and listened. Sometime late in the morning, accounts suggest just after 11 a.m., Ozzy's breathing slowed. Sharon was holding his hand, with Kelly on one side, Jack and Amy nearby, Jessica and Louis standing quietly. There was no medical emergency, no attempt to prolong life artificially. Doctors had already explained the state of his health. Parkinson's, years of respiratory complications, and the cumulative effects of injuries and surgeries had taken their toll. And then it happened. A deep, slow exhale, one that simply didn't return. Sharon reportedly kissed his forehead and whispered, "Rest now, darling. You've done enough." The room remained still for several moments. No one screamed, no one fainted. They had all known this moment was near. Sharon called the attending physician, who confirmed what they already knew. John Michael Ozzy Osbourne was gone at 76. The family didn't immediately release a public statement. They sat together for hours, privately mourning, telling stories, even laughing through tears. Jack later posted a single candle emoji on Instagram, which fans immediately speculated about. By mid-afternoon, Sharon and the Osbourne family released an official statement to the press. "It is with more sadness than mere words can convey that we announce the death of our beloved husband, father, and grandfather, Ozzy Osbourne. He passed away peacefully this morning, surrounded by family and love. We ask for privacy during this deeply difficult time." The statement spread like wildfire. Within minutes, Ozzy Osbourne trended globally on Twitter, and every major news outlet, from the BBC to Rolling Stone, ran breaking headlines. Ozzy Osbourne dead at 76. Fans flooded social media with tributes, pictures from concerts, album covers, clips of Ozzy's most iconic interviews. Celebrities reacted instantly. James Hetfield of Metallica, "Without Ozzy, there is no Metallica. Rest in peace, legend." Dave Grohl, "The guy taught us to go loud or go home. Godspeed, Ozzy." Rob Zombie, "The master of shock, the king of heavy metal. Thank you, Ozzy." Even British Prime Minister Keir Starmer issued a short statement recognizing Osbourne as a cultural icon whose music shaped generations and put Birmingham on the global rock map. The hours after the announcement felt surreal for fans worldwide. Outside Ozzy's home in Buckinghamshire, people began leaving flowers, candles, and hand-drawn bat symbols. In Birmingham, crowds gathered near the Black Sabbath bench at Broad Street, a tribute statue that had stood for years as a testament to the band's roots. Someone painted, "Thank you, Ozzy," in bold white letters on the pavement, and by nightfall, fans were singing "Crazy Train" together, their voices breaking under the weight of grief. Streaming numbers for Black Sabbath and Ozzy's solo work skyrocketed overnight. "Paranoid" and "Mama, I'm Coming Home" hit the top of iTunes and Spotify charts within hours. A digital candlelight vigil of sorts, each play a whisper of remembrance. Even professional sports teams paid tribute. The Los Angeles Dodgers played "Crazy Train" as their team walked onto the field that evening. WWE, which had inducted Ozzy into their Hall of Fame years earlier, posted, "We lost a friend, a Hall of Famer, and an inspiration. Rest easy, Ozzy. Sharon Osbourne released a brief second statement later that evening. Ozzy loved you all, truly. Every fan, every voice that ever sang along, every hand that ever threw the horns in the air. You were his family too. Thank you for giving him his dream. Ozzy's legacy doesn't just live in record sales, though they are staggering, with over 100 million albums sold between Black Sabbath and his solo career. It's in how he helped invent a genre. Before Sabbath, rock was heavy, sure, but it wasn't evil. Ozzy's voice, paired with Tony Iommi's down-tuned guitar riffs, gave the world something it had never heard before. Music that felt dangerous, even forbidden. He proved that you didn't have to be polished to be powerful. His vocals were unrefined, yet unforgettable. He couldn't read sheet music, often couldn't even recall song lyrics on stage without a teleprompter. And yet, people worshipped him for his raw energy and honesty. Outside of music, Ozzy became a pop culture phenomenon. The Osbournes' reality show turned him from heavy metal menace into lovable, bumbling dad. Millions watched him mumble through daily life, fight with a remote control, and chase after his misbehaving dogs. It humanized him, making him accessible to a whole new audience who may never have owned a Sabbath record. His struggles with addiction were public and brutal. He was open about relapse, rehab, and his regret over missed years. But that honesty made him an advocate for others facing addiction and Parkinson's disease. He used his platform to say, "It's not weakness to ask for help. It's the strongest thing you can do." In February 2025, just months before his death, he released his final single, Gods of Rock and Roll, a collaboration with guitarist Billy Morrison and a 60-piece orchestra. Critics called it a love letter to everything Ozzy ever stood for. Now, in hindsight, it feels like a deliberate farewell. The contrast between Ozzy's life and his final hours is striking. For decades, his existence was defined by chaos, substances, arrests, near-death experiences, controversial stage antics. Yet his last 24 hours were everything he rarely had: calm, love, and peace. In his youth, he was terrified of dying alone, once saying, "I don't want to go out in a hotel room or on the road like some junky cliché." And he didn't. He died holding his wife's hand, listening to his daughter's voice, his son by his side, his home quiet and safe. It was a full-circle moment. The man who lived loudly left quietly. And in that, there is poetry. Ozzy often said he felt like two people, John, the shy kid from Aston, and Ozzy, the rock star alter ego. That final day, there was no Ozzy, no stage persona, no Prince of Darkness. There was only John Michael Osbourne, husband, father, and grandfather. That's how his family wants him remembered, as a man who gave everything to music, but kept enough love to give to them, even when his body was failing. Ozzy Osbourne's life was a paradox. He was the Prince of Darkness who brought millions light through his music. He was a symbol of rebellion who ultimately found peace at home, surrounded by the people who loved him most. His story proves something simple yet powerful, that even the loudest lives can end in quiet dignity, and that legacy isn't about how you die, it's about how you live. If Ozzy's life or music ever touched you, if you headbanged to Paranoid, screamed along to Crazy Train, or even just laughed watching him fumble with that TV remote on the Osbournes, drop a comment below with your favorite memory. Which Ozzy moment will stay with you forever? And if you enjoyed this deep dive into the final 24 hours of a music legend, hit the like button, subscribe, and ring the bell, because we have more powerful stories like this coming soon. Thank you for watching. Rest in peace, Ozzy Osbourne, the man who truly went off the rails on a crazy train and somehow brought us all along for the ride.